Well, let's turn immediately to someone who can perhaps inform us on that. We'll go straight to our first guest on TNG, who is the Secretary of State for Transport, Grant Shapps. Good morning, Mr. Shapps.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about Ukraine first, of course. Now, we've just been mentioning those. Kate just described some of them. Really disturbing reports coming out from areas of Russia, areas of Ukraine, rather, that Russian troops have recently withdrawn from around Kyiv. In Bucha, for example, a town just north of Kyiv, Ukrainian forces found a mass grave with nearly 300 people in it. Claims of civilians being found dead, lying in streets with their hands tied behind their back, apparently having just been executed. What evidence are you hearing at the moment that these sort of claims might well be substantiated, which would potentially amount to genocide?
Yeah, last night I spoke to my opposite number, the infrastructure minister, Alexander Kubrikov, who's in Kyiv. He's in a bunker and is getting regular reports from people on the ground. And it's clear to me that as the Russians fled, as Putin's forces have moved out quickly, they haven't had time to destroy the evidence of what, as you rightly say, looks like incredibly disturbing pictures. That is very much the view that's coming across. Very important, even in these war-torn times, that this is documented, because the potential for criminal proceedings afterwards must be there, must be kept alive. I think it's incredibly important that's done as well. They're clearly moving back at some speed because they haven't had time to cover their tracks. And the conversation actually was particularly interesting. I speak to my opposite number, Kubrikov, every couple of days. The conversation last night was quite interesting because they are at least tentatively, although accepting this is still some time away, turning their minds to what it would be like to rebuild Ukrainian towns and cities that have been flattened, what kind of expertise they'd require, and looking for our help and assistance. So it's a very fluid situation. I have to say, of course, we're not anywhere near there as yet. But it's interesting to hear the mindset of Ukrainians on the ground who think that there is an end.
Now, according to the mayor of Bucha, Russian forces, as they were pulling out, rounded up all men aged between 18 and 60 and executed them. Now, if that is true, that would be genocide, wouldn't it?
Clearly, yes. If it's true, it is. And I don't think there's, I think the world needs to be ready with the evidence here, because that some of what we've seen on our TVs and social media has been horrific. We're hearing these stories coming out all the time, and quite clearly they'll need to be properly evidenced and investigated.
Now, a Ukrainian negotiator said last night that a draft peace treaty is sufficiently developed to allow direct talks between Ukraine's President Zelensky and Russia's President Putin. Does the British government think a peace deal might be close?
Well, I don't know about close. And remember that President Zelensky has been asking to speak to President Putin since before this all started. In fact, in those, when you look back at them now, rather absurd weeks before, when people were going to Moscow, the one person that he wouldn't see, Putin, was, of course, President Zelensky. So I don't know whether this means that we're any more likely to see that meeting happen anytime soon. But the war is very much grinding on, and Putin has clearly not made the advances that his generals told him to expect, and so this does move potentially into a new phase. But I would caution against thinking we're there already.
Now, the Prime Minister told the Cabinet this week, a meeting that you were at, in fact, that the UK will be going up a gear, in his words, in its military aid to Ukraine. Can you tell us what that might mean in practice?
To a limited degree, I can. We've provided another 6,000 of those very successful anti-tank weapons, the NLAW weapons. Of course, we provided those before this conflict got underway. We're providing weaponry that can be used ground to air to assist with the airspace. Of course, it's been debated a lot. We're not going to be, as NATO, intervening directly in the airspace, for example, flying NATO jets over.
One idea interesting, I wonder if this did come up in Cabinet, if you can share with us, is the idea of supplying Ukraine with drones, offensive drones, which they will use as defence, of course. Did you discuss that, and might the government do that?
I don't want to go. I don't want to sort of go into excessive detail on this, other than to say two things. No country has been stepped up to the plate before this conflict got underway in providing military defensive weapons, and I think it's fair to say that no one else or few others will have provided equivalent assistance during this battle. If you want to know where the delineating line is, it is that the weapons are used in defensive form. So this is not about attacking Russia or the Russians. This is about defending Ukraine, and that is where the dividing line is. And of course, Britain's given more humanitarian aid than I think any other country until recently, when the US, with obviously a much larger economy, have provided aid. When I speak again to my opposite number, he says that Britain's pioneering. His words are, please tell people Britain is pioneering. Where Britain goes, others follow, in support of Ukraine. And I think that's been very evident from the public's response as well to this.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about what you're doing at home, because you are doing a bit at home as well. Now, you've impounded a yacht this week that belonged to a Russian oligarch, and I think in the last 24 hours you've also impounded a jet as well. Are there any more assets linked with the Russian government or to oligarchs on your radar right now? Some helicopters, potentially, I hear whispers about.
Well, actually, I've already held a helicopter which was being boxed up to be shipped out in order to evade or avoid the sanctions.
So
that is now going nowhere. I don't think I'm yet at liberty to say, but that will come out shortly. You mentioned a jet this morning, which has been held. That's true at Luton. There are a couple of other jets also on the ground, unable to leave now for individuals who've been sanctioned. And then there was the super yacht last week that we've held. Now, people will say, well, it's all very well, it's around the edges. But I just say, I think it's very, very important that oligarchs who've benefited from Putin, know that their assets are going to be frozen, that they can't sail those yachts away or fly those aircraft away. And I think that's a very important message to send.
You don't want to say who this helicopter belonged with, I understand, but the details in brief, it was being, you said, boxed up to be shipped out of the UK. Can you tell us where it was going?
So the issue was that, of course, the very first thing we did, day one, was to close our airspace to Russian aircraft. And very quickly, the rest of the world followed that as well. So the individuals involved would have known that they couldn't have flown the helicopter out of the country, but were potentially instead trying to put it in a box and ship it on a circuitous route, not direct, but clearly going eastwards. And we've essentially denied that and held the helicopter so that it can't be shipped out of the country.
We look forward to hearing some more detail about who that might have belonged to. But Mr. Shapps, I also understand you yourself have decided to take in a Ukrainian refugee family into your home. May I ask, how did you find them, and when might they arrive?
Found them on Facebook. As with all, there were lots of people talking about it, and I was asked, as lots of other people were, and we'd already been discussing it since the beginning of the outbreak of war, that if we could help them, then we'd really like to. I don't think of them as refugees. I think of them as evacuees, because I know from talking to this family, who, as I say, we found on Facebook and then speak to on WhatsApp.
Do you mind me just asking, you were literally just on Facebook thinking, we'd like to help someone, let's see if we can find someone to help?
Yes, also I was asked the question, my wife and I and our kids had already discussed it many times over dinner, as it were. And so when I was asked, it was reported that people came onto my Facebook and said, we're a Ukrainian family, we've just fled, in this case, Kyiv. And we'd like to come to the UK if it's possible. And we had more families contact us than we could take, but I passed those on to other people in my local community and my constituency, or and try to get as many of them picked up as possible. So
Well,
yeah, that's exactly how it came about. Yes.
that's really interesting to hear. Now, I ask you when you made that offer, because as you well know, the minister responsible, Lord Harrington, just appointed to look after Ukrainian refugees, has this morning told of his frustrations, how much time it's taking to simply connect Ukrainians who want to live here and Brits who want to take them, just as your good self. When did you make
Yeah.
the offer?
Yeah,
How long ago has it been?
Right at the beginning, the very first
So
hour
you've been
that
waiting,
the
what, 4 or 5 weeks now to get the paperwork over
I
the line?
think I'm right in saying that was Friday 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. It is a bit frustrating. I should just explain the situation with the family that we're bringing over, evacuees we're bringing over, is 3 generations. So it's a mother, her mother, who's 75, and her son, who's 6.5, and their dog, who's called Max. Anyway, so the mum, the grandmother, the 75-year-old, was traveling on a national ID card, not a passport. So it doesn't have biometrics or what have you. So although the mum and the children the child was able to doesn't require a visa, the grandmother does. And they understand that, and they understand why as well. And she actually now has that visa and waiting for one more technicality, and they're booking their flights or transit this week. So I agree, it can be frustrating. On the other hand, I would say, Tom, that if we ended up in a situation where, it wouldn't be beyond Putin to put Russian saboteurs into groups of people fleeing the country, and I think it is reasonable that the UK would want to carry out some checks. Over 29,000 visas have now been issued. So the numbers are ramping up, and I think we'll see that ramp up a lot faster still. But of course, from a human point of view, I just want to get the family over here, and feel that they're safe and living with us. So,
I understand. I think the number of Ukrainian refugees under the scheme you've applied to, that the homes for Ukrainians is minimal, though. It's barely in the thousands, isn't it? But look, we'll get those figures this week.
No, that's right. But I think we will see that start to increase very, very quickly.
Well, ministers have been saying that for weeks now, but let's wait and see about that. Can I move you on to a few other things we're very keen to talk to you about this morning? The Energy Security Review. Now, we finally think we are going to get it this week. It's been quite heavily delayed, quite a lot of interesting discussions between your various cabinet colleagues on it. Let me ask you about a few points in it. Onshore wind turbines is a bit of a contentious point. It has been with your party for a decade or so now. You and I remember the debates over that during David Cameron's time when you were a minister as well. Will this energy review, from your knowledge of it, see us build more wind turbines onshore?
So first of all, I don't think you have to wait too much longer. I think you will see it by the end of the week. Secondly, we think that, broadly speaking, we have an untapped or a much greater ability to be tapped, almost invisible, but immense national resource. And it's largely offshore, where the wind blows harder.
I understand about offshore. That is, if you don't mind me saying, it's a given. Onshore is the question.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to lean you in the right direction here. I'm trying to give your listeners a heads up that I think that in terms of very large expansion, we already actually do the most offshore wind in the world. But in terms of large expansion, I would look to see more of it offshore. I think that's the logical place to do it, both in terms of the amount of wind and where the investment can go and where you can build it at very large scale. Now, I'm not saying there can be no more onshore wind. There may be places where that's appropriate. But do I think that we should have fields of vast fields, as we do offshore, of wind farms? No, I don't think that's what you're going to see in the plan this week, for very good reason. It doesn't work as well, and of course, environmentally, it also creates all sorts of problems.
Can I ask whether this energy security, which of course include nuclear and other renewable sources of energy, and obviously less consumption of gas and oil eventually, although we might take some more out of the North Sea before then, will this make people's energy bills cheaper or more expensive?
Cheaper, for certain.
Will it? Because there's a huge debate about that. I mean, the amount of money you have to put in to build nuclear power stations is absolutely astronomical.
I think we see that the costs of, I certainly recognise the costs of relying on hydrocarbons from elsewhere, the risks involved are immensely high, and much harder even than for us, for Central European, Germany in particular, who buy huge amounts of their oil and gas from Germany, whereas we're able to get that out of our system in pretty quick quick speed. But it is challenging. I think the more you have your own energy security, the better. I do remember you mentioned about David Cameron and wind farms. I remember us having to put enormous subsidies, bigger than nuclear, to build wind farms. Well, all of those days have gone now. We can build wind farms very, very inexpensively out at sea. I mean, not inexpensively, they're expensive to build, of course, but by comparison to the support they once required, it's a different world. And so I think that's important. Modular nuclear reactors, I think, form a very important part of this. We already have modular nuclear reactors. They operate in our Trident submarines. I think we need to look to energy security that will last for this country and be a mix, so we're not stuck with any one form of energy.
Okay. Exactly when it becomes cheaper rather than more expensive, I think we'll have to wait and see. But
well, of course, that is subject to global. I mean, you asked a very good question, but as you well know, this is part of a global market, which is why it's remarkable that we don't buy any of our petrol. We do buy some diesel, but none of our petrol comes from Russia, and it doesn't change the fact that the prices at the pumps still have gone up in line with global oil markets. So of course, Putin being defeated is the most important thing. He cannot win this war, and if he did, it would lead to even more uncertainty in the future. On
the wider issue of the cost of living, though, this is a huge concern. Obviously, you're well aware pretty much every bill we possibly have went up on Friday with the start of the month. Now, a cabinet minister told the Times this week on the help that the Chancellor Rishi Sunak has made available to people struggling, consumers so far. The cabinet minister said it's not enough. It doesn't even touch the sides for a lot of families. It feels unsustainable. Were you that cabinet minister?
No.
I didn't think you'd confess that. Do you agree with that cabinet minister then?
No. Look, the first thing I want to say is, we get it, all of us who are seeing what's happening. We understand that the pricing is, is unbelievable, the way that we've seen from the lows during coronavirus, when I remember going past the petrol pump and 99p you could buy a litre for, and I go past the same one now and it's 165. So I think we all
you say you get it, but the public don't appear to think you do. They're very angry. Your own cabinet colleagues are furious the Chancellor just hasn't spent enough.
So the thing I would say is the Chancellor spent £22 billion on cost of living issues so far, of which 9.1 billion is on energy alone. So I mean, I don't think we don't have time to list all the measures, but there are dozens and dozens of different things that we're doing to try to make sure that A, we provide some protection, and B, where there are increases, it falls on people who are more able to afford it. So a very good example of that would be the national insurance threshold rise, which comes in July, which means you'll be able to be paid £12,500 a year and not pay any national insurance at all. It's worth £330, and it means that 70% of people are workers are better off, even after the health and care social levy.
Even after you make them pay more tax.
Added to the NHS. So we're trying to focus this on the people who need it the most. That's the point I'm trying to stress here.
Mr. Shapps, good morning. It's Kate McCann here.
Okay.
Hello. Look, there are several serious allegations being made against a colleague of yours, David Warburton, including claims that he made unwanted advances to young women. Is Westminster still failing to protect staff who work for MPs?
It's very concerning to see these stories this morning, and I don't know anything more than I've seen on the newspaper. And of course, there have been suspensions in the meantime whilst this is all investigated. I may have misunderstood the story, but my impression it didn't happen in Westminster per se.
I don't think that's the point, though. Forgive me. It's not the point where it happened. It's that there is a culture still in Westminster that's problematic.
Well, look, the only thing I can say on this is I imagine. I mean, for a start, this needs to be investigated first, right? I don't want to sort of shoot from the hip. So let's talk in the general. And on that, clearly, any abuse in any form is wrong, no matter where it occurs. In particular, of course, if it happens around leadership, in particular, it's unacceptable. I suspect you get this in these things do happen across different walks of life. And if you're asking me directly, it may just be a product of where I do or rather don't hang out in Westminster, but I don't see or witness any of this at all. But I don't spend my evenings drinking heavily or sort of partying hard. So I can't testify to seeing any of this. And either way, the simple answer is that any of these types of issues need to be properly investigated by the proper authorities.
So you don't believe there's a problem? There's also a suggestion around this morning that he could be a victim of a honey trap, potentially orchestrated by a foreign power. Is there any credibility to that, do you think?
Again, I'm afraid you're enticing me to speculate on things that I really don't know the answer to, and I wouldn't have any reason to. So I don't want to sort of add rumour and speculation to what is obviously a serious set of allegations that needs to be properly investigated by the proper authorities, Kate.
Okay, Mr. Shapps, you've been generous with your time. When will you tell us whose helicopter this is you've impounded?
Yeah, I think in the next week or so, that information will be available.
We will wait. Grant Shapps, Transport Secretary, thanks so much for joining us on TNG this morning.